A pie chart shows proportions. For example, you have a cake. You have to share this cake among your children, for example, by making sure you cut this cake equally, or maybe you want to give someone based on their performance. You want to slice this cake in different proportion. So this is exactly how pie chart looks like. So if you remember a cake, then you remember pie chart. So in this case, we have a pie chart of some companies like Apple, Samsung, Huawei, and others. A pie chart usually would be in a circle, okay? And it illustrates proportional contributions of different categories to a whole. Sometimes these categories are measured in percentage, and sometimes these categories are mentioned in degrees. So depending on the question. Let's look at this example. This is a pie chart showing the market share of different smartphone brands. This is an example of a question on pie chart. The pie chart illustrates the global market share held by leading phone brands in the year 2024. Summarize the information by selecting, reporting, and comparing where necessary. I just summarized it. You want to select, report, and compare where relevant. Write at least 150 words. Let's now move on to how to analyze tasks like this. The first part is to identify the segment. In this task, we have Apple, we have Samsung, we have Huawei, and we have the others. And then you take notes of the percentage, or if it is in degree form, you take note of the degrees. In this form, we have the Apple, which is 40%, we have the Samsung, which is 30%, and we have Huawei, which is 20%. Now we can summarize what we have in this data. We could say that Apple holds the largest market share at what? 40%, followed by Samsung at 30% and Huawei at 20%. This is a summary of the trend, meaning that 90% of the market share is proportionately shared among Apple, Samsung, and Huawei, while the remaining 10% is shared among others. Now let's move on to writing the introduction. We begin by describing the task and also summarizing the trend. So in this case, how do you describe the trend? You can pause this video and describe the trend, then see and compare it with what I would show you next. This is an example of an introduction. The pie chart illustrates the global market held by leading smartphone brands in the year 2024. The first part of it is the description. Then overall, it is evident that Apple commands the largest segment of the market, followed by Samsung and Huawei, while a significant proportion of this market share is shared among numerous other brands. So you could see how we have summarized this trend, but take note, we have not mentioned the data. So you don't have to mention the data in the introductory paragraph. Now let's put it in our notes. So we have written it in our notes, and then we move on to the next paragraph. In the next paragraph, we want to compare. So we want to do the comparison one. Comparing the first thing to do is to compare the popular trends as usual. So in this case, what are the popular trends? We have Apple, we have Samsung, and Huawei. So we are comparing the data among these three brands. in comparison 1. Let me show you an example. In this example, Apple holds the dominant proportion, accounting for 40% of the total smartphone market share. This makes it the clear leader among all brands presented. Samsung follows as the second largest player, securing 30% of the market, which is 10% lesser than Apple share. So in this case, you could see how we have compared Apple with Samsung. So when you are describing this data among the popular brands, you have to compare their differences. You have to mention their differences. Then Huawei constitutes the third largest segment, representing 20% of the market. So in this paragraph, we have selected and reported the data from the popular trends. And now we have also compared this data among these markets, Apple, Samsung, and Huawei. Now let's move on to the next paragraph, where we're going to be comparing the trends from the less popular trends. In comparison 2, we want to compare the less popular trends, which are the other phone brands. This is an example of how to do the comparison 2 for this type of task. You can see this example stating the less popular brand, which has 10%. The remaining 10% of the global market share is attributed to other brands, indicating that while Apple, Samsung, and Huawei collectively control 90% of the market, there is still a small, diverse segment made up of smaller competitors. So in this case, we are comparing, we have stated the less popular brands, and at the same time, we compare with the other brands to show how they've been influenced in this data, in this results. Finally, we have a conclusion. It's not compulsory to write a conclusion, but if you want to do, this is an example of a conclusion for this task. In conclusion, the chart clearly highlights the high concentration of market share among the top 3 manufacturers. So this is exactly how to answer a pie chart question. A pie chart would show proportionate descriptions of different categories, while line graph would show a trend from a particular period of time to another period of time. Then a bar chart would compare trends. So a bar chart would always compare trends, okay, while a pie chart would proportionately describe trends, what is happening. So bar charts and pie charts perform about the same function but in different ways. Line graph would always show what has happened for a period of time, trends of what has happened in a period of time. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about the other 3 types of questions which you could come across in Ielts Academic Writing Task 1. Thank you and see you in the next lesson.